starting your own business, the Recordery, becoming an entrepreneur. You've been working on that. The first time I heard of you, Brad, actually was when you produced, I forget, it was the Grand Theft Bus album.
Say it with me?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I just remember people going to your place and recording. You were doing that at your house,
Yeah.
and you were doing it as a kind of a freelancer. And then you went. What was the difference of doing kind of a freelance gig and going in full out with the Recordery?
Oh, well, the big thing there was when I was recording out of my house, there was a limitation in terms of who I could record. And the reason is that if you're recording in an unfinished basement, and I mean in this place, well, I started doing it mobile, but and then this was the natural step up. So at the beginning, it was the gear just kind of lives in a pile. I'd get in the car and I would record like pretty well wherever the band rehearsed, and that was a start because you have to start somewhere. And then once we started renting a house, it was okay. Now I have a place to do pretty well the same level of work, but I don't have to travel around, right? It can kind of live in, it was still the equivalent of a rehearsal space. It was concrete floors. The walls don't actually meet the ceiling. Like we were throwing cables over the walls and that sort of thing. But at least it could stay in one place, and a band could stay set up for a few days, that sort of thing. Like it wasn't disrupting anything. But the nature of recording that way is that, if I wanted to bring in a client that didn't know me, it wouldn't work, right? You can't just pull, if somebody's going to do voiceover for a government ad or something like that, they don't want to walk into, a house with, bare gyprock and, concrete floors, and they're going to be like, what is this, right? However, my friends knew that the product was still going to turn out okay. So they understood what was happening, and they understood that it doesn't really matter what it looks like. And so that worked. But it did create a barrier in terms of, how far I could grow that business. And at the time that the Recordery formed, I think Evan and I were both experiencing a little bit of a lull. And I think we both kind of hit that point where we're asking the question of like, do we keep doing this, or is this the end of this? And so at that point is when we decided, well, why don't we at least stop competing with one another? Because we were kind of serving the same market of bands, and then the whole thing is that his studio has the presentability and far superior gear and a lot more of it and that sort of thing. So by moving into that space, I was able to start, reaching out to people that, would have, that visual aspect would have been a barrier. And I think it was mutually beneficial because, there's a pool of bands that, I've built a relationship with that will pretty well always work with me, that he's able to benefit from, that sort of thing.
And he's also recorded some great bands.
Totally, yeah.
I mean, your guys' catalog is impressive. The both of you have recorded some of the best bands in the Fredericton area over the last few years. Now that you're kind of in it, you've been doing this now as the Recordery, I think about 2 years now.
Yeah, that's about right.
It always takes a while to start a business to kind of really know where you're going, but you guys currently are doing some renos, and of course, family stuff is happening all at the same time. Do you feel, are you starting to feel more comfortable now that you're taking that position of making that decision to go into this business?
Yes and no. I mean, I think the longer you do it, the more you have to look at it and, sort of keep reevaluating, like from a business standpoint, like, is this actually working? Whereas like when you first dive into it, it's just sort of all optimism that like, this will work and, we'll be able to do this and this and this. And so at a certain point, you do have to look at it and be like, we've been in it 2 years, like, are we growing? I think we are. I mean, we've been fortunate in that we are always busy. Actually, I can say that even about before we were the Recordery, that like I literally have not had a project for 12 years or something like that. Like I've always been recording somebody. And we have been able to maintain that, actually almost to a point of it being overwhelming, if that makes any sense. Because I mean, at this point, we're usually have about 3, 4, 5, 6 projects on the go at any given time. We do still, I think like the struggle is still like, how do you make that a viable income source? But I think that's kind of, you know, any small business, especially in that context where you know, it's project based. So it's not like point of sale, like I take your money, I give you this thing. Everything, it takes time. And I mean, you would deal with that as well, right?
Oh yeah.
You're working on projects that take a long time. Like,
And also getting paid takes a long time.
exactly. And that's the thing is like, if you're providing a service that takes a long time, then like sort of balancing the income of cash and that sort of thing is a little bit of a challenge. And I think that's kind of where we struggle right now, is like, how do you get that to work? But that's also where, I mean, I'm not a business person. Like, you know, I started a business out of necessity, but like, I don't really feel like someone who has a lot of business smarts. So it's just kind of a figure it out as you go and that sort of thing. So I think somebody who is probably smarter at running a business could probably look at what we're doing and be like, oh yeah, you know, you could do this a lot better from that standpoint.
Would you say, and actually, it's funny you say this because this is what I'm going through right now, what
Sure.
you're talking about.
I don't doubt it.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, it'd be nice to find maybe some resources that could help businesses in the arts like our own, just to get some training and development, like just having maybe a conference once a year that could bring in some people that could maybe help us from a business perspective, because one is, the arts aren't always treated like a business anyway. A lot of times artists themselves are taken advantage of. So it's kind of, in some cases, you want to help everybody, but you financially can't.
Well, and you raise a good point there just about artists being taken advantage of, because it makes it it is a tricky business venture to serve a market that isn't really making any money, right? And so it becomes hard for the artists, who are our clients, to always justify paying for what we're doing. And I think I've never had anybody tell me that what we do isn't worth the money, but that doesn't mean that they have it to spend, right? And so you end up with a lot of people recording themselves, which is totally fine. And actually that world is, I mean, home recording is getting so good that there's a lot of times where it doesn't make sense for, you know, the gap in terms of, you know, I could record myself for free, or I could record professionally for this price. You know, the gain in the product doesn't always meet up with the extra expense, especially if an artist knows that there isn't going to be a huge return on it.
Yeah, that's kind of the challenge that we're all facing, is that it's kind of a very actually I wrote a question that was talking about what is the difference between musicians trying to do their own recording versus, say, the Recordery, which is what you're answering.
Yeah.
I think that for me, why I would go to someone like you is that, and is to go in a place to have someone else with an objective ear. To, like, there's so many things that you guys can provide as a service that someone on their own could not necessarily do easily.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that it's kind of like, you know, people ask me why, like a lot of people will come out and film and there'll just be 1 or 2 people doing it, but I bring a crew out, and I usually bring a crew out because I think it creates a unique environment, and there's a lot of people that can put input in, and the content, I think, is always better as a result of that. But at the same time, I can only do that if it's financially viable.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge too. So yeah, it's an interesting industry, but I think the thing is that for aesthetics and looking for quality, you're going to want to go to someone like you to get to go to the Recordery, to make sure that you have, one, accountability and objectivity, and an overall guarantee of quality sound.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's just that thing of when someone records themselves. Actually, and I like, this should be kind of a more general statement. I think when anybody does something themselves. Like let's say it's plumbing. So something breaks in my house and I decide I'm going to fix it myself. I'm going to do that and sort of try to figure it out as I go. I'm probably going to screw it up. It may kind of work in the end, but hiring a professional, that professional is going to look at it, and because they've done that so many times, they're going to already foresee what will happen, so that, you know, that sort of weird way that I fixed that pipe, they're going to know, oh, when you do this, later on this will happen. Therefore, this is how you should actually fix it. And I think that's kind of what, you know, whether you're talking about a studio or, you know, a film production company, it's you're really just paying for that knowledge of these people have done it before. If you tell them, here's what we want to do, they're going to know how to do it and not run into those bumps, because they'll see them coming. You know what I mean?
And sometimes that's cost effective in its own right.
Oh, totally.